Hello, it's Mr. Singleton from Outward Academy Trust. This lesson is all about transpiration and translocation. So this is specification, this is what you need to know about these two subjects. If you haven't done the plant organ system lesson previously where we started to talk about transpiration and translocation, please go back on the YouTube channel and have a look at it. So we've got to talk about transpiration and how it's affected by different conditions, and we have to talk about what transpiration and translocation mean. So that's what we're going to look at this lesson. Again, specification just helps you with what you need to know for your exams. It's freely available, AQA, onto Google or any other search engine, AQA, combined science or biology if you're doing biology, separate science, and specification, and type that in and you'll be able to get this document. Bit of a recall then from the previous lesson. I want you to have a look at the structure of a leaf and label the different parts. If you can relate each structure to its function, so what does each part do? I'll give you 2 minutes. You can do this in the back of your book or on a whiteboard. Off you go. If you are really struggling, please remember the 2 ways that we tried to remember these, which was either, and this is, remember, it's the first letter of each word, when under pressure, sleep like Grandma Singleton, or you can have wad up slugs. You've got 1 more minute. Let's go through some answers. So top part of that leaf is called the waxy cuticle, and it's waxy so that it's waterproof and it stops water coming out of the leaf. The next part is called the upper epidermis, and that is translucent, so it lets light through into this very important layer called the Palisade Layer. Now the Palisade Layer is very important because it's got lots of chloroplasts in, and that is so it can photosynthesize a lot. The next layer is the Spongy Mesophyll, and these have air spaces in so that carbon dioxide that the plant needs, that the chloroplast needs to photosynthesize can get there, and it can get rid of the oxygen as well that it doesn't want. And then at the bottom you've got the lower epidermis, and within the lower epidermis you have these very important cells called guard cells, which will open and close the holes at the bottom of the leaf, and those holes have a special name called the stoma or the stomata if there's only one of them. Today's title is Transpiration and Translocation. So this needs to be underlined with today's date if you're using your book. If you're using a revision card, then put biology paper 1 at the top. This is still part of biology paper 1. And then you know which revision cards are being used for which exam. Make sure it's underlined. I'll give you 30 seconds. Off you go. The challenge today is to describe the process of transpiration and translocation. And then the aspire is to try and explain the factors that will affect how fast or the rate of transpiration. So there's 4 factors that will change how fast transpiration happens. A little bit of a recall from earlier on and possibly year 9 lessons. How are root hair cells adapted to take up as much water as possible by osmosis? What is the definition for osmosis? I'll put these on all the time because these are little 3-mark questions in the exams. What's osmosis? What's active transport? What's an enzyme? What's a hormone? Those things that are 3 marks and quite easy if you can remember them. And then why is a process in leaves of a plant called diffusion? When the water leaves the plant, why is it called diffusion? I'll give you 2 minutes to have a think about those and get an answer down. Off you go. You've got 1 more minute. Okay, root hair cells are adapted because they have this like little sticky out bit from the cell, which is the hair part of it, which increases the surface area of the cell, which allows it to get more water into the plant. Osmosis, 3-mark question. So osmosis is the movement, or you can say diffusion of water. The word water will give you a mark from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution. Or you can have from an area of high concentration of water to a low concentration of water. That will also give you a mark. And then the most important part that most people forget is it's through a partially permeable membrane. So that would be your 3rd mark. Why, when water leaves through a plant leaf, is it called diffusion? Well, there's no partially permeable membrane there anymore. It's just a gap, just a stomata. So therefore, then it can't be osmosis. Just a bit of application. So transpiration is the movement of water through a plant, and the movement of water, it goes from the roots up through the stem and then out through the leaves, and that is what transpiration is. In a little bit more detail, it moves up against gravity, which is interesting, isn't it? It can move up through the stem, and all those cells that it goes through, which are called the xylem cells, are actually dead. So it doesn't use a pump, it just goes up against gravity. It's a bit like magic, and it goes through the xylem vessels. Then it will move into the spongy layer and to the palisade layer, which is where it needs to be for photosynthesis, and then it will diffuse out of the leaf. Remembering that specification at the beginning, it said you have to know the 4 factors. My old A-level biology teacher many moons ago told me the best way to remember these is it's about when you hang out your washing. So what's the best conditions for hanging out your washing? Well, it's when it's hot. Yeah, so an increase in temperature will make transpiration happen faster, and that's because there's an increase in kinetic energy and evaporation from water. The evaporation from water then moves quicker, so therefore transpiration moves, the water moves out of the leaf quicker. Transpiration moves quicker. Also, you put your washing out when it's very dry, so it's an increase in humidity. This just means that there's less water in the air, so then more water is likely to come out of the leaf. It's going from its very dilute part, which is the leaf, out into the concentrated part, which is the air. So hot and dry conditions are the best conditions for transpiration to happen. The other thing that where you might put out your washing is when it is windy, so increase air movement, and that just removes the water from the surface of the leaf, so it moves it right out of there. So hot, dry, windy conditions are the best conditions for transpiration to happen. The other one you might want to talk about is increased light intensity. So the plant senses that there's lots of light there. It then knows that there's going to be lots of carbon dioxide. There's lots of light there, so it wants to photosynthesize very quickly, and therefore it's going to let more carbon dioxide in. That opens the stomata and lets more water out. So Google quiz time to check your understanding of those parts of the lesson. I'll give you 4 minutes, off you go. So this is an interesting one. This used to be an A level, and it's made its way into a couple of exam questions. So I wanted to go through this with you a little bit. This is a pottometer, and this is a piece of equipment that we use to measure how fast transpiration is occurring in a plant. So what we've got is obviously a plant in there, and that is going to soak up the water in that tube. And as it soaks up the water, that air bubble will move to the left of your screen. And so then we can work out how much water that plant has taken up. If we need to, we can reset that bubble by opening that reservoir, and that will push the bubble back to the start. So this is a potometer. It just works by showing us how fast transpiration is working. So we could use this, put the plant in, and make it very, very sunny in that room, and see how fast transpiration occurs, how much water is being taken up by that plant. So water's lost through the plant through evaporation, and it's replaced through the tube, and the air bubble moves along the ruler, and that's really important. The reservoir resets it, and then the beaker of water is there, so there's a constant supply of water for that plant. It's quite a handy little bit of notes to have on there. I've seen it in an exam already. I'm assuming it's going to make its way into a triple exam. It was in an A-level exam a couple of years ago, so just be aware of it. It's about more applying your knowledge. You know, they could ask you, how can you measure, how can you work out the volume of water being taken up? Well, you take the diameter of that tube where the air bubble is, and work out the area of the circle, and then times it by how far it's gone, and that will give you how much water has been taken up. So just be aware of applying your knowledge with these. Translocation is a little bit different, because this is the movement of sugars through the plant, and that uses not the xylem vessels or the xylem cells, but the phloem tissue. Now the glucose that's made in photosynthesis moves from the leaves, and it goes everywhere. So it goes to the rest of the plant, and it's either for immediate use in terms of, you know, respiration, it might use it for, or it might store it as starch, or it might use it for cellulose. Later on in another unit, we talk about what plants actually use the glucose for, but you need to be aware that it does move to other areas. Now the phloem is composed or made up of these really long cells, and the cell sap, that glucose syrup nearly, can move through these little pores at the ending. Now the phloem is a living tissue, not like the xylem, which is dead tissue. So Google quiz time on translocation. I'll give you 3 minutes, off you go. Okay, you got 1 more minute. We have now described the process of transpiration, which you know is the movement of water, and translocation, which is the movement of glucose. And we've also gone through those 4 factors that affect transpiration and why they affect transpiration as well, which is more important. So I want you to have a look at this, which is the plenary, and this is I want you to try and apply your knowledge a little bit. So it's describe and explain the graph. So describe what's happening first. So just have a look at the graph and say what's happening. Whenever you've got these describe questions, you know, look at the graph and look at what the graph is showing you. So you can see it says the rate of transpiration on one side and the humidity on the other side. So first part of this is just saying what the graph shows. The higher the rate of the higher the humidity, what's happening to the rate of transpiration, and then try to explain it. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this because I want you to have a good go at it. So describe it first. What does the graph show? And then when you've got this, explain. It's explaining why you need to use the word because. Good luck. Off you go. You've got 1 more minute. So a model answer on this. As the humidity is low, the rate of transpiration is higher. Okay, so that's your first bit of describe. So, or you could put high humidity means lower rate of transpiration. Either way. would give you a mark. And that's because there's less water in the air, so now there is a concentration gradient. You've got somewhere where there's not very much water, and you've got somewhere where there's lots of water. As humidity increases, there is more water on the outside of the leaf, so then transpiration decreases as there is less of a concentration gradient. So once you get rid of that concentration gradient, there's going to be less transpiration and the water is going to hold more of its water. If you want to make a revision card on this lesson, then you need to know that transpiration is the movement of water from the roots to the leaf of a plant, and it happens in xylem vessels. We have already talked about xylem vessels and xylem cells, the fact that they are dead, the fact that they are strengthened with lignin. That is all in the previous lesson. Transpiration happens quicker in hot, sunny, humid and windy conditions, and you need to make sure you understand why that is. Translocation is just the movement of glucose through the plant, and that happens in phloem vessels. Remembering those phloem vessels have these little pores in them, just little holes in them, to allow this glucose solution to move through it. I'll leave that on for another 2 minutes. Remember, this is still biology paper 1, so put that in the top corner if you need to. 2 minutes. If you need to pause it, pause the video. Okay, you have 1 more minute. So if you haven't finished that revision card, just pause the video. If you have, then what I've done is made some exam questions for you on this topic. So please have a go at these, either print them off and have a go at them and then hand them in to your teacher, or do them on a Google Drive and then send them to your teacher. Either way would be great, because it'll just keep you helping with your exam technique. Well done, guys. Keep it up.